Good evening and welcome to the first Murder by the Mic series. This is a series of conversations co-hosted by Novel Suspects, Hachette Audio, and AudioFile Magazine. I'm Michele Cobb, publisher of AudioFile. We're the #1 source for audiobook reviews in the world, so lots of listening, lots of recommendations, and we've got another one here today. So I'm going to start off by making note that I'm not an audiobook narrator. So when I stumble through those bios, normally Hillary Huber, who's here with us, would do a great job, but I'm going to read those bios. I'm going to make a few mistakes.
I believe in you, Michele. Go for it.
So first off, we have Lisa Gardner, who's a #1 New York Times bestselling thriller novelist with over 30 million copies of her books in print worldwide, and they're published in over 30 languages. That's huge.
Thank you.
She is a self-described research junkie. I love that, and we're going to delve in a little bit more later. And she has transformed her interest in police procedure and criminal minds into this streak of internationally acclaimed novels. Her novel, The Neighbor, won Best Hardcover Novel from the International Thriller Writers, and she has been honored for her work with animal rescue and at-risk children. So multi-talented here. She's also an avid hiker, gardener, and cribbage player, and she lives with her family in New England. Hey, where I'm also located. Still See You Everywhere is her 28th book. Congratulations. And for more information, please visit her website at www.lisagardner.com. And see, her name is spelled right there, so you can easily find it. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. And while you're at the website, you can nominate the person of your choice to die in my next book, which narrated by Hillary. But yes, the Kill a Friend, Maim a Buddy sweepstakes is open for business. So, you know, any bosses, spouses, friends, yourself, if it's annoying you today,
you know, mean girl in high school.
I can take care of it for you. It's my community service on behalf of my readers.
I kind of love that. Now my mind is going like, who do I want to get rid of in my life? All right. And with us is the award-winning narrator, Hillary Huber, who is the voice of Lisa's Frankie Alkin series.
Yay.
And she has recorded over, wow, this is a big number too, 700 titles spanning many genres, but thrillers are her favorite. And she has a bachelor's in English literature, and she's a voracious reader, of course, and listener to audiobooks. And she's bi-coastal, so she spends her time in Santa Monica and New York. But most of that time is actually not outdoors or in front of these Zoom boxes, but it is in a 4x4 booth, just recording.
I have to call it my padded cell.
Exactly. And when not recording, she also likes hiking. So I will say I also like hiking. So 3 hikers here. Planning parties, knitting, and enjoying a lovely bourbon cocktail while planning her next trip.
Nice.
Ooh, cheers. Lots of travel stuff happening here. We were just talking in the green room about how travel is sometimes fraught. Lisa's been experiencing that on her book tour. But to think about travel is nice. And we're going to travel a little bit as we talk about your book. So let's kind of give us a little bit of background and talk about the character of Frankie Alkin, because 3 years ago you debuted her. She's remarkable, and she was in that instant bestseller, which is Before She Disappears. Then we saw her again, or heard her again in my case, in One Step Too Far. And now we have Still See You Everywhere. So tell us a little bit about Frankie. Who is she?
So Frankie is fun for me. Like many thriller authors, I started my career writing about FBI profilers. Then I had a detective, Boston cop, Dee Warren. But Frankie is my first ever, what we would categorize as an amateur sleuth. But she's actually based on things going on in the real world right now, which between the internet, the information age, we're seeing more and more people get involved in cold cases. So Frankie's obsession, and she's not specially trained. She does not belong to any kind of law enforcement, but she's looking for the missing the rest of the world has forgotten, which very sadly is hundreds of thousands of people in the US alone. But, you know, if the police could have solved it, they would have. If forensics held the key, someone would have figured it out. But you get all of these people who were not seen in real life, and in many cases aren't even being investigated once they disappear. And that's kind of Frankie's obsession. She goes from town to town for no money. She works as a bartender to get some cash, but she's a recovering alcoholic, and she would argue this is how she stays sober, by kind of immersing her in other people's problems. That kind of classic, it's so much easier to solve other people's problems than your own. So she goes from town to town looking for the missing, and Still See You Everywhere brings her to a very interesting location to find the missing person.
So now, Hillary, you have voiced Frankie from the start. So I'm curious, what's your take on this woman who's not FBI, she's not law enforcement, but she's got that obsession that Lisa keeps talking about for finding the missing?
Frankie is up there in my very most favorite protagonists that I've ever narrated. And one of the main reasons for that is that she's damaged. And I love that about her. She's got a past, and that past haunts her, and it's always with her, and it drives her to do what she does. And I just find that a damaged protagonist is a more realistic protagonist, and it doesn't matter what the damage is. It gives you something to maybe identify with. My damage may not be the same as her damage, but she's not just some perfect, supermodel prancing around the planet. She's a real person with a past. And so I love that. And it gives me as a narrator something to really hang on and dig into. And she's snarky, and she's smart, and she's strong, and she puts people in their place, which, as Michele knows, is nothing like me at all.
I will say, as the author, I think Hillary's totally nailed the wise ass part of Frankie, hands down. Just to throw that out there.
Weird.
I might attest to her being like that in person too. So Lisa, I'm totally curious, what motivated you to have Frankie really sit outside of being a detective? And from that, you've talked about how you like to research. How does a private citizen get access to the information that they need to investigate missing people? And, maybe tell us, are there resources if we want to become true crime aficionados and solve missing person cases of our own? Where should we go? And what was used in building this character? That's a lot.
The answer to everything is yes, 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 and yes. You can. Most of my books have been inspired by real life. I mean, I've been at this, it's actually like 35 years now. I figured out the other day, which is kind of embarrassing. But I read an article on a real world person. This is what she did. And there was all these women going missing on tribal lands, and no one was even looking for them, which is very much the situation that brings Frankie to, off the coast of Hawaii. The number of indigenous Native Hawaiians that are disappearing, no one's looking for, is a known fact. The DOJ will say, we're pretty sure there's a problem there, but we're not actually tracking it. We don't have any information, but hey, there's a problem there. And one of the things I got was a question. You're an author. You want a question answered. And the fundamental question in real life or Frankie universe is why? Who the hell does this kind of thing? And like Hillary said, there's damage, but there's also, I don't know that Frankie knows. And it makes her already one of my favorite characters. She's kind of learning by doing, and that makes each book exciting for me. But when you get to the real world, how does an everyday person do cold cases in particular? Interestingly enough, they're in some ways in a better situation for it. A lot of our missing people are marginalized communities, minorities, communities that aren't comfortable talking to the police. So the fact that she's not law enforcement is already actually a strength of hers. And the other thing I like to say about Frankie is she's a great listener. Like, that's her superpower. She is a great listener. And that's something that's missing, I think, from this day and age. But it's something that so many people are looking for. If they can get the right person to not just ask them the question, but to wait and hear their answer, that's the information you're going to get. Because again, I mean, she's not a hacker. There's nothing on the internet that gives you the answer. There's no magic forensics like we missed the glove that's going to give you the answer. She interacts with people. She talks to them. She gets to know them. She gets to know the situation. And following those breadcrumbs, that is what brings you to a resolution.
Oh, and I think those are the things that probably make her really interesting to play, right, Hillary?
Well, yeah, but she like infiltrates whatever town or
Community,
city, community. And she has no possessions. She has a backpack. She has no home. She has a burner phone. And she just travels around and becomes one with the community first, just so that she can follow those breadcrumbs. There's a paragraph in each of the books that I love, and I want to read it real quick because I think it encapsulates her really well. My name is Frankie Elkin, and finding missing people is what I do. When the police have given up, when the public no longer remembers, when the media has never bothered to care, I start looking for no money, no recognition, and most of the time with no help. And that just, I love that. It just, every time I come upon that, I'm like, yes, here it is. Here is what Frankie does. Yeah.
So Hillary, I'm curious, is there anything in particular you have to do to portray Frankie vocally? I mean, she's sort of a normal person in terms of, she doesn't sound odd in any way, but because it's outside of a normal detective, do you play that a little bit different?
Frankie is pretty much me. That's how I play Frankie. I don't put anything on her. It's, if I were doing what she's doing, one thing we're taught is to always start at our own truth when we do this kind of work. So if the character is realistically sounds like me, then that's what I'm going to do, because that's going to be the most real. And then other ancillary characters, I play with their voices for sure. But Frankie is she's just gonna sound like me.
It is so much fun. Hillary and I got together last year in New York, and over martinis, we're like, yeah, it's like, you are totally Frankie. Like, we got this. I mean, Frankie can't drink. She's a recovering alcoholic, but I'm like, otherwise, I'm like, Frankie's in such good hands. I mean, like, such good hands.
And hopefully we'll do it again. Are you going this year?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
I'll see you there.
A little meetup at Thriller Fest, I imagine.
Yeah. Where all the cool kids are.
So let's talk about the sort of remote locations that you bring Frankie to. This time it is extreme. I'm curious why this extreme location for this book, and then also what makes you always bring Frankie to places that are remote?
Well, so 2 years ago, I took a 1-year sabbatical. I've been writing for 30 years. I wanted a year off. Travel is my passion. So I wanted to go to some places that are remote, and you need some time. It's like, this isn't going to be a weekend getaway. It might take you a weekend just to get there. And one of the opportunities I had was go to a place called the Palmyra Atoll, which is, you fly to Honolulu, and then it's a 3-hour charter jet or 2 weeks by boat to reach this location. It's not populated at all. It's just a research station. I mean, I went there because I'm into the environment, and they're doing really fabulous work on the ecological reclamation of coral was the technical term. And so, we were given all these rules. I mean, you can't cross-contaminate. We had to freeze our clothes before going. I mean, These are rustic cabins. You're going to be no Wi-Fi, no cell phone, no electricity, no plumbing. This is the luxury trip here. And I was like, yes, this will be great. This will be great. And I remember this moment, the plane brings us in, we unload our frozen clothes, and then the plane takes off. And I kind of look around, I'm like, that's our only means on and off this atoll. I mean, we're so remote, they don't even want you to have an appendix, because you're 3 to 5 days emergency medevac off if something goes wrong. And I'm surrounded by 12 complete strangers, and all I could think of was Agatha Christie, and then there were none. And then I was like, oh, I so got to use this in a book. I so totally got to kill someone here. And so that became the inspiration behind Still Seeing You Everywhere. And yeah, I mean, I like the immersive experience. One of the fun things for me, Frankie as a series character going back to what Hillary said, whatever community she's going into, whatever environment she's going into, the key to her success is she needs to learn it, adapt, blend in, or she won't be able to do her job. Outsiders don't play well. She's got to figure out how to become part of this situation.
She's like a chameleon.
Yeah.
She glides right in there. You also just made me think about, my husband was in advertising, and they would joke, the big joke in advertising was, every time you try to write a new campaign, it's like, we open on a palm tree lined beach.
So now I'm very curious. Did you have to have your appendix removed to get to this?
No, I had mine and I was panicked for the entire. Okay, so this is the other thing. It happens in the book and it happened in real life. It was going to be 5 days. So I spent all 5 days like, appendix, be good, appendix, be good. And then day 5, there's a storm. The plane can't land. I mean, it's a crushed coral reef runway. There's no airport at all. It's wow. Very much like, I don't know, Fantasy Island or something like that. And so if there's cloud cover, if there's anything, the plane can't make it and they can't come the next. So we're extended like 3 days, which, you want to tell yourself, I'm in paradise. I'm in a tropical paradise. We get to stay longer. No, we all cried. We honestly cried.
Wow.
It was so hot. It was so humid, which was the other interesting, psychological experiment. You started off with people who I like to think were intelligent and pretty, had strong EQ scores. And then, by day 3, we're like, I haven't had a dry towel, a dry sheet. My hair is still wet. And it's been, and it was fun to watch the meltdown. It's like, yep, this is totally a suspense novel in the making. And that wasn't
Lord
even
of the Flies.
That was the real life.
Well, that does not sound like Fantasy Island.
No, not my fantasy.
But I imagine it was great research for the book, not just for the plot, but also there's a lot of descriptions of flora and fauna. And you sounds like you were living right there with all of those things.
Talk about the coconut crabs, or what are they called? Is that what they're called?
Coconut crabs, yeah. Because again, there's no plumbing. So there's a latrine. You get to go at night. And at night is when the coconut crabs come out. And so we're given all sorts of rules. And so at night, you leave your tiny little cabin and you have your little flashlight. And the coconut crabs are carnivorous and they're nocturnal and they're mean and territorial. And they're basically crabs the size of your dog. And
they're big and ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's many times just like, I just really want to pee. And then the coconut crab is like, fine, I will wait. I'll go back to my cabin. You're correct. I didn't want to walk there anyway. I mean, because whatever they wanted, they got.
Wow. Google them, you guys. They are scary looking. I Googled that immediately. I'm like, what are you talking about?
It was so much fun on book tour because I would start events by saying, okay, I'm going to talk about coconut crabs. You might as well just Google them now because you're going to want to know. And you could tell when people got them on the phone because throughout the audience, you hear this like, oh my God. I was just, yes. You have seen the picture, I take it.
Well, I'm glad that I wasn't the only person that Googled that because yes. So Hillary, I mean, we've just heard about all of Lisa's real world research. What kind of research do you do on the narration end?
Well, I read the book. That's first. And I do, obviously, language research, vocabulary research to make sure I know how to say atoll.
That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of Hawaiian words in this book. I grew up in Hawaii, actually, part of my time in Hawaii. So
oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. I didn't mention that. Yeah. My dad lived on Oahu for a long, long time.
See, and I was born in Hawaii at the Navy base. So see, Hillary and I really are
we're like this. Yeah. Yeah, on the North Shore in Haleiwa and in Kahala too. So, and then I just, as I'm reading the book, there's a lot of just sort of marinating that happens with the characters, trying to get to know who the characters are. What's driving them, who the red herring is, who the bad guy is, just trying to see what the story arc is and how I'm going to either shine a light on the red herring, play with that a little bit to not give anything away. And and hopefully lead people astray a little bit, because I think that narrators have the power to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I take a lot of copious notes about each character, try and figure out what they sound like. And
you're telling a story where you know the ending. I think that's actually really challenging and not something that we talk about enough or you get enough credit for. Because I mean, think of any time in your real life you try to tell a story when you know the ending. It's hard not to broadcast it.
Yeah,
your whole job is not to broadcast it.
No, it's to find the other things that we can shine the light on to lead them astray. You know, I think about it a lot in unreliable narrators, which is a really popular trope,
Yes.
right? Girl in a train, girl in a window, girl in a bus, girl falls, girl does.
It's all girl. Yeah,
it's all girl. It's all sans serif, and but that, you know, so 3/4 of the way through the book, this woman who you think is sane, all of a sudden you find out she's batshit crazy, and if you play her like that because you know that, you're doing the audience such a disservice. You need to make her saner than everybody. So it's just important thing to keep in mind, that we can ruin it if we're not paying attention.
Well, that's interesting because you have to discover the words in a way as you narrate. So I think that's definitely a skill. And I'm curious, Lisa, when you are creating this character and, you know, she's kind of closed off, she's dealing with a lot of backstory, are you discovering things about her, or do you kind of pre-plot all of these characteristics of hers and her background? You know, tell us about that process a bit.
So I actually don't plot at all. In the writing world, we call it, like, we're kind of split 50-50. There's the people who plot, and then I'm what they call a pantser, which is a short term, right by the seat of your pants. So I really am making it up as I go along. So someone like Frankie really works for me because, I mean, I don't even know why she's doing what she's doing. She doesn't even know what she's doing. If you're pantsing, you need questions, and you need even as you answer the question, you need that to just lead you to the next question. And as long as you're doing that, you're humming right along in the book. But for me, going back to what Hillary just said, I believe if I plotted in advance, if I actually knew who did it and what the resolution is, it would be hard for me as a writer not to broadcast that.
Ooh, interesting.
So I'm learning as I'm going, you know, when I meet readers and like, I never would have guessed the ending. It's like, yeah, me neither. I mean, total shock.
It's incredible that you don't plot that out. I had no idea. You didn't even know who done it.
That's the way we do it. And I swear, I mean, I feel like in the beginning of my career, when I first started out, and the blank page is terrifying, you do plot. And to me, it becomes very linear, and it becomes the best ideas you had in one day. Whereas if you let the book develop on its own, and the characters like Frankie kind of find their voice on their own, that's what makes it more complicated. And that's what makes, to me, the ending work. Though I'm not going to lie, there is definitely a sense of relief, generally like 2 days before deadline, of, oh, thank God, I figured that out. Oh, I didn't survive another week.
Did it. You know, it makes me think of, in the narrator process, you know, people will say to me, how many times do you read the book? I'm like, well, once. I read it, well, really twice, but I read it once.
I was curious about this, actually.
Yeah, well, one reason for that is I don't want it to become stale for me.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Right? Like, you've told the same story 40 times. It's like, blah, 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 I know the story, and And so I like to be a little bit on the edge of my seat too. I mean, I've read it, I know what's happening, but not to the point that I'm rehearsed. I'm not rehearsed at all. So I guess that's what I'm getting at. So that I can be a little on the edge of my seat too.
Well, I'm interested, Hillary, because you're not rehearsed, and this character is very much you in many ways. And so is there anything when you pick up the new book, this is your third, that you have to do to kind of like re-find Frankie and, you know, kind of make her feel fresh?
No, because I just get her.
Yeah.
I just feel like I get her a lot. So no, and I'm not blowing smoke up Lisa's house right now, but I love her. I love Frankie, and she's
I will say you are the perfect Frankie and the perfect voice. Like you do get her, and I think that's what makes it work and makes it come across. So
yeah, it's always a joy, and it's not always like that. I am struggling with one right now, and that's okay. You know, some I got to work harder at. But when the powers that be do their job and they match the right author with the right actor, it's magic, and it feels really special. I feel really blessed and lucky that that they brought that book my way.
You know, Hillary, you were nominated for an award for Before She Disappeared. I mean, you got this.
I was. Well, maybe let's hope for the next one too.
Well, there you go. You just keep bringing it on. All right, so we have some audience questions that we're going to get towards the end. So, you know, those of you who are watching, please put your questions in that Q&A box. And we've even answered one without even meaning to do it, which is great. But I'm very curious, you know, if you don't plot, how did this book get started? It's about two sisters. We don't want to say too much, you know, and they've got a big bond. Was there a particular story that sort of lit this off, or was it your trip to the, you know,
so my real world trip gave me a setting. Yeah, I mean, writing a novel is almost like making a soup. You're just kind of reaching for ingredients from all over the place and then hoping it all works out in the end. Frankie she checks message boards to find questions. She researches things to find questions. This is unique, but even by her standards, she's summoned to death row in Texas. There is a female serial killer who's trying to find her because, you know, 15 years ago, the woman's sister was kidnapped in Hawaii. Her young sister, like 5 years old, was kidnapped. She just received word she might actually still be alive. And, you know, in the 3 weeks before she's executed, she really just wants to know that her sister is safe. And this isn't something the police are going to take on. And no one really wants to help, you know, a convicted serial killer who's not even repentant. She's a beautiful butcher, and if she got out tomorrow, she makes it clear she would love to kill them all over again. She's actually like my new favorite person. But
she is. No, she's not holding back. That's what I love about her.
She's not.
To make this a total slam dunk. Yeah, she was just a voice in my head. That's how I live. So, and her talking, that became the beginning of the novel. She's the one. She still sees her baby sister everywhere, and she longs for her. She misses her. She just wants to know she's safe. And that complexity of, I mean, she is not a nice person at all, but man, her sister is the one relationship in her life that she loved. And the fact that she feels like she failed her by not being able to find her, I think is powerful. I think it speaks to people.
Don't you think, Lisa, every good villain needs to have something soft? It's a sympathetic, don't we call it a sympathetic villain? Is that what it's called?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, I do workshops on characterization. And one of the things I've always remembered, because I started my career with FBI profilers and researching all these serial killers, is, you know, Ted Bundy had a value system. Whether it makes sense or not, he would not steal uninsured cars because he thought that was cruel.
Oh.
And it's that kind of juxtapositioning that, I mean, it happens in real life. We know people like that. Like, they're complicated in ways that don't make sense, or they do things you're like, really? You'll do X, but not really? But that value system, I think, is what makes everyone has a value system, even serial killers. And if you can figure out what that is, that makes them human. And that makes them interesting. To go back to your point, Hillary, we like flawed people because we recognize them. That's who we are, all of us. You know.
So Hillary, must have been fun to play the serial killer.
Yeah.
Oh, it's always fun to play the serial killer.
There were lots of.
I always think it's better to write the villain. Like, those are my favorite scenes. Hillary, tell me the truth. When you're doing the narration, is it more fun to read the villain?
Totally.
Scenes?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because there's so much subtext, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's why I love doing narrating thrillers so much, is I get to play the bad guys, and they're so complicated. It's really fun. Mm-hmm.
It's like people like. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michele.
Some great characters in this, Hillary. I mean, you got to play a lot of sort of range of, you know, good guys and bad guys. Besides Frankie and the serial killer, did anyone stand out to you?
I have a list, actually, of some of the characters. Well, I mean, I loved the two women in the kitchen, Trudy and Anne.
Yeah.
I thought they had a great banter and a great deal scene going. It was just, you know, what was fun is that of all those people who were there working on that atoll, we'll see how many times I can say that word in this webinar. That's a word that scares us all, audience. It was just fun to figure out who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who's going to come and save you, who's going to turn on you in a hot second. So yeah, it was fun. It was a good mix of people.
And a great setting. I'm really charmed by the story of you being stuck in this remote location for an extra 3 days. And I feel that now after having listened to the book. I'm like, aha, there was a deep connection there.
It was so wet.
Not my thing. But okay, so this is one of the weird things too that happens in real life. I mean, Frankie didn't get to take advantage of this. So the plane that didn't land to take us off also was the plane bringing the food. So the cooks, who became the basis for Trudy and Anne that Hillary just referenced, was kind of like, hey, you guys want to eat tonight? You better go out and catch food. So we have a boat, and they're like, okay, we'll go fishing. And I'm like,
well, you've gone from Fantasy Island to Survivor.
Yeah.
Well, and this is what became kind of interesting, because again, it's like, I don't fish. I don't want to go fishing. And everyone's like, oh, you want to go fishing? I'm like, okay. But we get out in the bigger ocean, and we literally came upon, I mean, it's one of those things I'm going to take to my deathbed. It was hundreds of dolphins sleeping, and they actually rock in the water. You just see the fins for as far as you can see, but they're not moving. Wow. They shut down half of their brain and they sleep. And then we got to jump in and we swam with them. And then they played with the boat for like the next 2 hours, because I love, the wake and all that kind of stuff. And we could run our feet down their back. And then we caught a tuna and we clubbed it to death. And that was our dinner. I was like, okay, this isn't my real life anymore. I mean, it's
incredible.
I can't decide if this was like the best trip ever or the worst trip
ever.
I'm still processing it. That's why you got a whole novel. I'm still trying to figure out what this was. It was one of those outside your comfort zone kind of things.
I think that's good. And that really works for Frankie. She's always seeming to put herself outside her comfort zone. So you channeled that. All right. Now, I definitely want you all to have a chance to ask each other a question. And, again, I will prompt the audience, put some questions in that Q&A box. We will take them. So you did meet before. I'll ask you my final question. You did meet. You went to Thriller Fest. Did you meet before you did the first recording? Did you connect or discuss the book before you recorded the first one, Hillary?
Did we before the first one? I don't know that we did. We did before the second one, at least via email, but I don't know if we did before the first one. Do you?
I don't remember before the first one, but yeah, by the second one, definitely. In my mind now, you're Frankie. So, that's it. You're stuck with me now.
Yeah, you're stuck with me. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, we don't always get access to each other, authors and narrators, and which from my perspective, I think is a bit of a crime, but I get it because like sometimes the author's agent doesn't want us hassling them. Sometimes the actor has been micromanaged by the author. And so it's kind of, a two-way street. They want to listen and they want to hear the characters and start telling them how to sound. And so
I could be a diva. I could be more demanding.
You could be
what should I be doing?
Demanding.
I want to be the bad author.
I want to be
involved. Tell me how to be the bad author.
There you go. I want to be the bad author. Tell me how to say every voice, how to do every voice.
Oh,
yeah. I want this one to sound like my Aunt Myrna. And should meet with her.
You're going to be sorry. I am totally going to use this later, Hillary. You're going to be.
No, me and my big mouth. So sometimes they don't let us at each other. But I always find it to be obviously really beneficial to get in any info I can, right? So, and also just to let the author know, I think you're experienced enough, Lisa. You've done this for a long time, but especially for newer authors, that's going to be really scary to have written this book and then you're giving it to somebody you don't know, and they're going to interpret it. They're going to bring your words literally to life. And so I always, if I get an opportunity, especially to speak with a newer author, I want them to know that my main objective is to get out of the way, to be just a vehicle for whatever their intention is. So, for instance, if a friend of mine is listening to me narrate a book, after a chapter or two of going, oh God, I'm sick of Hillary droning on in my ear, I want them to forget that Hillary's droning in their ear. This is not about me being, front of stage at all. It's about me being behind the scenes. So that I like to tell authors that, so I'm really invested in what you've written, and that's my main objective, is to bring life to your words, not to my own. Look at me.
Well, and it's interesting from the author's perspective. So when the first Frankie book, Before She Disappeared, came out, I mean, they sent me 3 talents. You were one of them for me to listen to and say, who do you want? And I mean, listening to them, I was like, oh, that Hillary Huber lady, she seems good. I want that one. So there's choice on our end. It's 2. I mean, everyone wants this all to be the best experience possible for our audio listeners. That's what you're looking for, that perfect marriage. And there was something about your voice, Hillary. I'm like, that's Frankie. This is going to work.
Yay.
But I will say, as someone who knows you, Hillary, you did, although I know you're like this character, I didn't think about it being Hillary. I definitely thought about it being Frankie. So
because I can annoy you if I'm with you for too long, Michele.
It was like 12 and a half hours. I didn't even think about it being you. So there you go. All right. So Lisa, do you have a question for Hillary?
Yes, I'm going to ask the question I always get asked, which is, how did you get into narrating books? Because you've done so many things, but what got you into, becoming an audiobook narrator talent?
Yeah, I'll try and keep it short. I did commercials for a really long time, and it was great. I was in the right place at the right time, but I would watch these older women come in my agency. We went to the agency every day, and they gave you a copy and you auditioned for it and went on your merry way. And I'd see these older women come in, and I'd be sitting there with 10 pieces of copy to audition for, and they'd be given 1 piece of copy to audition for. And they were literally watching their opportunities melt away into the ether because they were no longer in the demographic. So I looked at them, and they had this look of desperation on their faces. And I thought, I got to pivot. I've got to do something else, because I cannot keep all my eggs in this basket, because that's going to be me at some point. That, coupled with the fact that at the end of the day, doing a Slurpee commercial, while lucrative, is not necessarily soul satisfying as an actor. And so I thought, what can I do forever? And what is going to sort of feed that actor in me? And it was audiobooks. So 20 years ago, it was 20 years next year will be my anniversary of my first audiobook, which was A Very Easy Death by Simone de Beauvoir.
Great, yeah.
I know, great, right? So it was those 2 things that made me realize that there's a bigger world out there than commercials. And it's a good thing, because I'm not getting the copy like I used to. I'm not. I'm not booking them either. So,
but you're booking books.
I'm booking books.
700 books later or something crazy like that. Wasn't that our stat?
Yeah.
750, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's worked for you. I think it was a good pivot.
All right. Do you have a question for Lisa?
I do. It's really a random one, Lisa. I hope you don't get mad at it. What 3 authors, dead or alive, do you want to have to dinner?
Ooh.
Oh, this one's fun. Okay. Always tops this list is Agatha Christie.
Awesome.
Partly because not just I'm a huge fan of her books, but she was such a successful female in her time. And yet we know that didn't go well also, or there was some challenges, because, she very famously also disappeared and then was found at the Swan Lake in Harrogate, because we still do a famous British crime festival there. And exactly what went down is a matter of conjecture. But I mean, again, she would be fascinating to talk to, not just as an author, but as a female. What was that like for her? Because I think it was not easy by any stretch of the imagination. So, I mean, that's one. And then Toni Morrison, just
that's a good
her
one.
words
Too.
are beautiful. I mean, she's one of those writers where, a single sentence you can ponder forever. And I think she would also be absolutely fascinating to speak to about all that. And then just to round it all out, because God knows he's hysterical and he could do anything with anyone, is Stephen King, because, you know, I'm in this whole business.
Hey, that's a good dinner party.
Yeah, isn't it? I think that I also think it'd be a good grouping and just be a lot of fun, and that should matter too.
Oh yeah, I want to be invited, definitely. All right, Hillary, we've got some audience questions here, so I'm going to start with one for you. How do you prep yourself for narrating books in general? And was this book any different? So you've sort of given us a little, but, you know, shade that in.
I've given a little bit about the actual book, but in general, it's kind of like being an athlete, this work. We have to train for it to a certain degree because it's long form. I mean, I'm sitting in that padded cell from 10 to 4 on any given day. And I have to take care of my voice. Obviously, we don't yell, so it doesn't necessarily get fatigued. My mind will go before my voice will go. I'll get wonky in the head. But I can't go to loud parties the night before I record. I have to think about what I eat. I have to make sure I, exercise and oxygenate. I have to hydrate like mad, not in the moment, but certainly before, the night before, the morning of. A lot of thinking about lip balms and stomach noises and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's not just sitting by your kid's bed and reading a book. It's a little more intense than that. So we kind of train for it to a certain degree.
It's definitely a marathon, having watched them recorded.
It's a marathon.
That's fascinating now that you mention it, because I mean, I loved reading to my daughter when she was younger, but yeah, 30 minutes and
yeah, and you're out. No, we're all day in there.
I do not know how you do that.
Sometimes I don't either.
You're in that 4x4 cell, right?
That's why it's padded. Mm-hmm.
Do you ever wear like a Superman shirt underneath? I just feel like there comes this moment you need to merge into the whole Supergirl, Superwoman. I don't know.
As long as it's not starched and no jewelry, right? So,
that's right. No starched shirts.
All right. So Lisa, tell us a little bit about your writing process. So how long do you spend planning and researching versus writing each day? So
as a thriller writer, I'm a book a year. So Frankie has been coming out either February or March. So the news release was March. I do a lot of research, generally several months in advance. And then I do what many of us affectionately refer to as the vomit draft for 6 months. and that's the lack of plotting. So I'm kind of finding my way as I go. And the goal is to have a complete manuscript. But as you might imagine, it's rough. It's incredibly rough. And then another 3 months cleaning that all up. I mean, I kind of joke to this day, I don't know that I'm a good writer, but I think I'm a pretty good rewriter. And that's almost more where everything comes together for me. And there might be research that also happens because as you think of things in the story, you realize you're going to, pivot left here. Then you got to phone a friend again to figure out how to do that. So the research is intense in the beginning, but will also almost by definition be a little bit ongoing as well. And then at the end of the year, I like to write first thing in the morning. One of the things we talk about in writing organizations is figuring out biorhythms. Like, when are you creative? I mean, some people are morning people, some people are night people. I like to write with music. I have friends who need total silence. I have other friends who prefer to be in a crowded coffee shop or even a bar, like to be by themselves writing, almost as intimidating for them. They need to be surrounded by. I got the 3 dogs, so that works for me.
All right, so Hillary, let's talk about this person is interested in how narrators immerse themselves in characters. Do you have a way of practicing a voice to nail it down? And how do you know when you found the person, the right intonation, the sort of oomph that allows the writing to shine?
That's a great question. I don't know if you ever really know until you're done, but as I'm reading, I do take notes. So first of all, there's just the auditory sound of their voice. So I take notes about their age, whether they have accents, whether they have any kind of mouth things going on. Do they have dentures? Do they have a lisp? Are they missing teeth? stuff like that. Do they have braces? Anything that may affect the way they speak, where they're from. And so I take notes about that. I take notes about the next level is who they are, what they want, who they are, what their archetype is, for lack of a better word, what their personality is. I'd rather play attitude than just, you know, attitude is what you really aim to play rather than layering on a sound. So are they snarky? Are they a people pleaser? Are they intimidated? Are they a pushover? Are they a bully? Are they, what kind of archetype do they fulfill? And I read, I talk, I do it unfortunately now. I do it when I'm reading for pleasure too. I'm reading it. I'm reading the voices. Their voices are happening in my head, and they just settle and they develop. You know, characters get repeated all the time, so you'll always find my like dude in almost every book. He's like the hapless guy. He's like everywhere. You're going to find the same voices over and over again with little twists to them, but I certainly have a stable of characters. I play a lot of my family members. They come into play a lot.
Do they know this?
Well, they don't really sound like them, but like my mother-in-law shows up all the time. Anytime I've got just some woman who doesn't give a crap, there she comes.
Oh my God, that's so good.
She's not here anymore, so that's okay. I can say that. Yeah. But you know, I think, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. If you, not Frankie at this point, well, not Frankie because she was me also, but if you listen to a character at the beginning of an audiobook and you listen to them at the end of the audiobook and you put them side by side, there's a good chance they're going to sound different. And this first occurred to me a long time ago. I had a book that had 3 characters that spoke together a lot. And it took me a while to get into this rhythm of the 3 of them speaking. But about halfway through the book, I was like, this is seamless. I'm like Sybil with a bunch of personalities. I'm like talking. And I thought, I want to go back to the beginning. I want to start over again because I've got these characters nailed right now. And then that wasn't going to happen. So I kind of justified it by thinking, well, they developed for me, but hopefully they developed for the listener as well. So, but one thing I do, one little trick, is whenever I'm recording, whenever I come across a character, I take a little snippet of that and I save it as their character names so I can refer back to it throughout the book. If they don't show up for 50 pages, I want to remember what they sound like. But I'll take another snippet at the end of the book in the event that it's a sequel. I want to listen to the second snippet to start.
Oh my God, that is so smart. That is
rather than the first snippet. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Wow. It's so intricate what you do. So thank you.
It's much more intricate.
All right, Lisa, where do you get some of your book ideas from? You've talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, most of mine come from real world issues. I was honored by the International Thriller Writers when Hillary and I talked about meeting at Thriller Fest. That's their conference each year in June. And I recommend for any aspiring writer, established author, you should join a writing organization. I noticed there was a question about for debut authors, join a writing organization. It'll give you people, it will help you make connections. You can meet your crazy audio reader who you realize is actually your soulmate. And it was so happy that you get to be together now. But they honored me for social services. I do a lot with at-risk kids, dogs, rescue animals. And a lot of my books kind of inhabit that space. And that's really so Frankie's world now too. So I'm reading all the time in complex issues. And one of the things I love best about fiction is the opportunity to walk in someone else's shoes. And not in a preachy way. I think that's where fiction does its best. You just walk in their shoes. And at the end of it, maybe you've changed some opinions, maybe you've gained some knowledge, maybe not. It's not my job to lecture anyone or even necessarily inform, but I like to take real world complex situations. Like, gosh, for Still See You Everywhere, there's so many things going on. One, there's a number of Native Hawaiians that are disappearing, that they're not even included in a database because the Department of Justice counts Native Hawaiians different than Indigenous natives in on, North American soil. So they're not even tracked. To, literally the tech moguls are buying out Hawaii right now. If you go to Hawaii, everyone will talk about it. So, we have the evil tech billionaire who's developing an entire island, and everyone's like, why did you do that? And I'm like, because that's actually what's happening. That wasn't even fiction. That was the part that was, so all of this. And one of the final things I will say, when you get to take things from the headlines and use them to inspire a great thriller novel, books give us closure. They give us a chance to get the information we can't get in real life. I mean, so many of my books, I wrote one years and years and years ago about school shooting, because I'm from Oregon and Kip Kinkle was Oregon, and my family are teachers, and just why do these things happen? What do we do? How do we resolve this? If you're a parent, what should you know? And books give us an opportunity to do that kind of deep bore that we cannot get in the real world. So, the headlines, I feel like Law and Order, in a case that's ripped from the headlines.
I love that, because it's not just entertainment. Your books are not just for entertainment, but they are entertainment. But there is a deeper structure at work there, which I think is what makes them so excellent.
Well, people are going to read them ideally in a day, maybe in a couple days, but it's going to take me a year to write them. So I need something in it kind of for me. Like, what are the things I want to learn? What are the questions I want answered? And it is a really great excuse and opportunity to call up people who have real jobs, like, the real experts out there, and say, okay, I'm a suspense novelist. Could you, and the minute you say things like, I want to get this right, I want to educate people. It's crazy, the people who will take my call and spend hours explaining very complicated things to me, because they do want others to understand. The opportunity to reach and get their message across and say, okay, this is what's really going on. This is why this is so complicated. This is why we don't have answers. It's powerful and meaningful to them too.
Wow. So lovely. All right. So we have questions. People want tips on, being a new writer and a new narrator. So Hillary, let's start with you. Any tips for new narrators starting on their journey?
Make sure you have acting background. It's not the voice. That's 10% of it. I'd say having you can't, have a horrible voice, but most important is that you understand literature, and you understand character motivation, and you understand story arc, and you know how to act. Because at the end of the day, we are all the characters in the play. And if you don't know how to connect to material and understand subtext, and you're relying only on sounding good, you're not going to produce a good product. So I think make sure you've got some acting background, and get ready to work really hard to make it happen, because it's a crowded field right now, and it takes some thick skin to get rejected all the time, which we do. We get rejected daily. So yeah, that was really encouraging, wasn't it?
Lisa, any more encouragement for new writers?
Let me just pile on top of that. Yes.
Yeah.
Thick skin. It's a crowded field.
Yeah, there you go.
Totally tracks. There's two things I always tell aspiring writers. One is you should be reading, but not just that you should be reading across the board. Even if you prefer thrillers, or you prefer sci-fi, or you prefer fantasy, there's something to be learned from each of the genres. Like, I started out in romance, and one of the things that really taught me was character, because in romance novels, the what doesn't matter, the who matters quite a bit. And that's something I could take with me into suspense, where the what matters. But now I have this great background in characterization. I even love poetry, because you talk about learning how to say something in 4 words or less. That's a suspense novel. You have to be tight. And then the second thing, really join a writing organization. This is where you get the answers to all these questions. Being able to go to someplace like Thriller Fest. I actually have a role in the International Thriller Writers, where I work with the debut authors. And we do so much for them, because it's so crowded. It's hard to be seen. And it's not even just publishing support. It's writing support. Yeah, here are all the other people who hear voices in their head and decided to write a book, and are now frustrated by this, or don't know how to get found, or don't know, and feel like, I don't know why I'm doing this and I'm a failure. And if everyone figures out I don't know, what we call it imposter syndrome. You meet enough authors, it's like, oh yeah, 30 years later, you're still going to have imposter syndrome. You know, you'll get used to it. It's fine.
All of that, right?
Just
I want to tack on too for newer narrators, check out the Audio Publisher Association. Because there's a lot of info there to help new narrators. You can join that. It's a trade organization for audio publishers. So a lot of info there, webinars and all kinds of arrows pointing you in the right direction of how to get started.
All right, lightning round as we finish off here. Lisa, do you think it will be possible for Frankie to have a partner who travels with her in future novels?
Well, I don't plan ahead, so never say never, but it would be a big growth. I mean, Frankie would have to really, really get pushed out of her comfort zone because she really is a loner. I mean, some people compare her to the female Jack Reacher, which, I mean, different, but I kind of like that dynamic because I think a loner female is not as well accepted as a loner male. So that's one of the things she's always kind of struggling with. You know, women aren't supposed to go town to town and never have any stable relationships. So I have a hard time picturing it, but never say never.
All right. What's the best way to follow you on social media?
On across the platforms, I'm at Lisa Gardner BKS for books. And if you go to lisagardner.com, you can check out everything and again, kill off the person of your choice, which is, you know, awesome. There's days you're really going to want that. So,
and do you have a newsletter there as well?
Yes, you can sign up for the newsletter. Yep, absolutely. Great. Thank you.
All right. Hillary, starting with you. What are you currently reading or watching?
I am reading Table for Two by Amor Towles, who I adore. Actually, I'm listening to it. Eduardo Ballerini is reading it, so that's always a bonus too. And I just finished watching an older show called The Fall with Gillian Anderson.
Oh, I've heard good things about that.
It's really good. Yeah. It's dark. It's really good. It was really good. Yeah.
All right, Lisa, what about you?
Well, I'm a huge Karen Slaughter fan, so I'm really, really enjoying Will Trent right now. And everyone keeps raving about Tracker, which is based on Jeffrey Deaver's novels, which is funny because I'll be honest, I haven't watched network TV for a while, and this is bringing me back to network TV, but go network TV.
Oh, it's network? Okay.
Yeah, I think Tracker's on CBS, and Will Trent is, I'm thinking ABC, but not 100%.
I'm thinking ABC. Isn't that funny?
I watched Reacher. That was so fun. A lot of
Amazon's Reacher.
A lot of headbutting.
Yeah. Love that actor.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both so much for all the wonderful insights and the fun that we've had here tonight. And I know now what to avoid when I travel into remote locations. So thank you. And thanks to the audience for joining us tonight at the Murder by the Mic series, which is co-hosted by Novel Suspects, Hachette Audio, and AudioFile Magazine. We've got links in the chat where you can find audiobooks and find, of course, the Frankie Elkin series. They're available to buy wherever you buy or borrow your books and audiobooks. So thanks, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Michele.